Michael Jordan played in front of thousands every night. But one man stood out. He never cheered, never clapped. He was always there, game after game, until one night, Michael finally looked at his face and realized this stranger wasn't watching the game, he was holding onto a dream. Something was wrong. Michael Jordan felt it before he understood it. The arena was alive. Thousands of fans roaring, shoes squeaking on hardwood, cameras flashing like lightning. This was familiar territory. This was home for Michael Jordan. Crowds were just noise, faces were just blur. He had seen too many to count, but this time, one face refused to disappear. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it didn't beg for attention. And yet, Michael noticed it. As he sat on the bench tying his laces, preparing for war, mops, his eyes drifted toward the lower section of the stands. That's when it happened. A man stood there, not cheering, not clapping, not smiling, just standing, perfectly still. Michael looked away, then something made him look back. The man hadn't moved. Why would someone stand silently in the middle of a screaming crowd? Michael narrowed his eyes. Years of competition had sharpened his instincts. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't imagination. This was awareness. The same awareness that told him when a defender was about to make a mistake. And right now, something felt off. The man wasn't dressed like a superfan. No jersey, no cap, no sign screaming MJ. His hands were by his sides, his face calm, almost heavy, like he was carrying something invisible. And the strangest part, he wasn't watching the game. He was watching Michael. Michael shifted in his seat, stretching his legs. He glanced at teammates laughing, slapping hands, joking like they always did. No one else seemed to notice the man. That made it worse. Why did it feel like he was the only one who could see him? The buzzer sounded. Warm-ups began. Michael stood up, bounced the ball, took a few shots. The crowd erupted every time the ball slid through the net. But even while moving, while jumping, shooting, running, Michael felt eyes on him. He glanced back toward the same spot. The man was still there. Still silent, still watching. Michael missed his next shot. That never happened. The game started. The energy was electric. Michael played like Michael. Sharp cuts, perfect timing, dominance without effort. The crowd fed him just like always, but between plays, between moments, his eyes kept drifting back. The man didn't cheer for the dunks, didn't react to the steals, didn't stand up when the crowd exploded. He just watched, as if he wasn't there for entertainment, as if he was there for something else. Was he waiting for something? Or someone? At halftime, Michael sat with a towel over his head, breathing slowly. He peeked out again. The man hadn't left, and then something unsettling happened. Their eyes met, just for a second, but in that second, Michael felt a strange jolt. Like recognition without memory. The man didn't smile, didn't wave, he simply nodded. Almost respectfully, Michael looked away quickly. His heart was beating faster now, not from the game, from the feeling. By the end of the night, the Bulls had won. The crowd stayed loud as ever, chanting Michael's name. Cameras followed his every move as he waved and walked toward the tunnel. Before disappearing, he looked back one last time. The man was gone. Michael exhaled. Get it together, he muttered to himself. One strange fan, one strange night, that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 nights later, different city, different arena. The feeling returned. Michael walked out for pregame introductions, soaking in the noise. Another packed house, another sea of faces. Then his eyes froze. There he is. Same man, different city, same silence, standing in nearly the same position relative to the court. Michael's chest tightened. That wasn't coincidence. He scanned the section carefully. Same posture, same serious expression, same intense focus. This time, Michael didn't look away. Neither did the man. They held eye contact longer now, long enough for the noise to fade, long enough for the moment to feel uncomfortably personal. Then the announcer called Michael's name. The crowd erupted, and just like that, the moment shattered. The game went on. But now Michael wasn't just playing basketball. He was thinking, who was this man? A reporter? A scout? Someone from his past? Michael had learned to live under a microscope. He knew what attention looked like. He knew obsession. This wasn't that. There was no hunger in the man's eyes. There was no excitement. Only something deeper, something heavier, almost emotional. After the game, while walking toward the locker room, Michael slowed his pace and glanced back through the tunnel entrance. He spotted the man again, this time farther up, closer to the railing, still watching, still silent. Security didn't stop him. Fans weren't crowding him. It was like he existed outside the chaos. How does someone become invisible in a crowd of thousands? Michael turned to a staff member. "Hey," he said casually, nodding toward the stands. "You see that guy there?" The staff member squinted. "What guy?" Michael looked again. The man was gone. That night, Michael lay in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling. The man's face replayed in his mind like a paused frame. The eyes, the expression, the stillness. Michael had faced pressure. He had faced hate. He had faced expectations heavier than most humans could carry. But this felt different. This felt personal. Why did it feel like the man knew him? Beyond basketball, Michael rolled onto his side. He thought of his father, of his childhood gym, of nights when dreams felt fragile. And then a thought crossed his mind, one that unsettled him even more. What if he's not here for who I am, but for what I represent? Michael closed his eyes. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, a mystery had just begun. And somewhere out there, in another crowd, in another arena, the stranger was already waiting. A pattern across cities at first. Michael Jordan tried to convince himself it meant nothing. One strange face in one arena could be coincidence. Basketball arenas were full of unusual people. Superfans, collectors, dreamers, people chasing moments. Michael had seen it all, or so he thought. But the problem with instincts is this: they don't stop whispering until you listen. And Michael's instincts were getting louder. 3 days later, the Bulls were on the road. Different city, different crowd, different energy. The arena lights shined brighter than usual, reflecting off the polished hardwood floor. Michael jogged out for warm-ups, bouncing the ball slowly, letting the rhythm settle into his body. He lifted his head casually and his heart skipped. No, not again. There he was, the same man, standing. Silent, unmoving, same posture, same expression, same eyes locked onto Michael like nothing else in the world existed. Michael froze mid-dribble. The ball bounced away, rolling toward the sideline. A teammate laughed. "Yo, Mike, you good?" Michael nodded quickly, forcing a smile. Yeah, I'm good." But he wasn't, because coincidence had just turned into a pattern. Michael kept stealing glances during warm-ups. The man didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even seem surprised to be seen again. It was as if he expected Michael to notice him. How does someone follow a legend without ever being noticed by anyone else? Michael tried to focus on his routine, same stretches, same shots, same breathing, but something was off. The man didn't move like a fan who traveled for entertainment. He moved like someone on a mission. During the first quarter, Michael drove hard to the basket, finished through contact, and landed to a thunderous roar. The crowd jumped to its feet. Michael didn't look at the scoreboard. He looked at the stands. The man didn't cheer, didn't clap, didn't even blink. He simply watched, like he was studying something far deeper than basketball. Michael's chest tightened. This wasn't admiration. This wasn't obsession. This was something else. By halftime, Michael had enough. In the locker room, while teammates joked and laughed, Michael sat quietly, towel over his shoulders, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "Anybody notice the guy who just stands there during games?" The room went quiet for a second. One teammate shrugged. "Man, there's always weird fans." Another laughed. "What, you got a stalker now?" The room burst into laughter. Michael forced a smile, but inside his discomfort grew. Why did it feel wrong to laugh this off? Because Michael knew one thing: this man wasn't there for the show. After the game, the Bulls boarded the team bus. Michael sat by the window, watching the city lights blur past. Every reflection on the glass looked like the man's face. Calm, serious, heavy, Michael exhaled slowly. "You're overthinking this," he told himself, but deep down, he knew he wasn't. The next week confirmed it. Another city, another arena, another crowd of thousands. And once again there he was. Same man, same silence, same eyes. This time Michael didn't look away. He stared, the man stared back. No wave, no smile, no reaction. Just two humans locked in a moment no one else seemed to notice. What kind of connection forms without a single word being spoken? Michael began noticing details now. The man always arrived early, always stood in nearly the same section, always left quietly, never spoke to anyone, never asked for anything, never brought a camera. This wasn't fandom. This was presence. And presence like that carries meaning. One night, after a brutal game, Michael walked off the court exhausted. Sweat poured down his face, his body ached. As he passed near the tunnel, something unexpected happened. The man lowered his head, not in shame, in respect. Michael slowed his steps. Their eyes met again. And this time, the man's eyes glistened. Why would a stranger feel emotional watching him? Michael felt a lump in his throat. That was the moment he stopped asking if this mattered and started asking why. Michael began replaying memories, faces from his past, people he might have inspired without knowing, moments that meant nothing to him, but everything to someone else, because Michael Jordan wasn't just an athlete. He was a symbol, hope, escape, possibility, and suddenly the weight of that realization pressed down on him harder than any defender ever had. Another game, another city. This time something changed. The man wasn't alone. A young boy stood beside him. The boy couldn't have been older than 10. He wore a worn-out hoodie and sneakers that looked one size too big. His eyes were wide, not at the arena. At Michael. Why did that child's stare feel even heavier than the man's? The boy tugged at the man's sleeve and said something. The man shook his head gently. The boy nodded. They both went silent again. Michael's chest tightened, because suddenly this wasn't just about him. It was about something being passed down, belief, dream, purpose. That night, Michael couldn't ignore it anymore. He sat alone in his hotel room, lights off, city glowing through the window. How many times has he been there? Michael wondered. How much has it cost him? Time, money, energy? People don't do that for nothing. What if this man wasn't following Michael Jordan, but following what Michael represented? The next game, Michael made a decision. He would confirm the pattern. He scanned the arena slowly, methodically, lower level, corner sections, mid, court, then there, same spot, same man, same silence. Michael nodded to himself. That was it. This was real. Late in the fourth quarter, with the game on the line, Michael stood at the free throw line. The arena went quiet. He bounced the ball once, twice. Then he looked up. The man stood there, hands clasped now, almost like prayer. Michael swallowed. He made both shots. The crowd erupted. But Michael felt something deeper than victory. He felt responsibility. As the team headed back to the locker room, Michael slowed down deliberately. He wanted to approach the man, but before he could, security stepped in. The crowd surged. The moment vanished, and once again the man disappeared. Michael sat down in the locker room, heart pounding. This was no longer a mystery. It was a message. He just didn't understand it yet. What happens when a legend realizes he's being watched not for entertainment, but for inspiration? Michael closed his eyes, because he knew one thing for sure now: this stranger would appear again, and next time, Michael would be ready. The moment everything changed, the night started like any other. Another sold-out arena, another roar that shook the walls, another city ready to witness greatness. Michael Jordan had lived this moment more times than he could count. The lights, the cameras, the chants of his name echoing like thunder. This was the world he dominated. But that night, the crowd wasn't what caught his attention. It was the silence inside one man. As Michael stepped onto the court for war, the noise felt distant. almost muted. His body moved on instinct, muscle memory taking over. A smooth jumper, a quick crossover, a clean finish at the rim. The crowd erupted. Michael didn't look up, not yet, because he already knew where to look. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his eyes toward the familiar section of the stands, and there he was, the stranger, standing exactly where Michael expected him to be. Same posture, same stillness, same unreadable expression. But something was different this time, very different. The man's shoulders were tense, his jaw was tight, and his eyes were wet. Michael felt a sudden pressure in his chest. Why would a grown man cry during war? Mups. This wasn't celebration, this wasn't excitement, this was emotion, raw and unfiltered. Michael tried to shake it off. He turned back to the court, took another shot, missed. That never happened. The ball clanged off the rim, echoing louder than it should have. Michael exhaled slowly. Focus, he told himself, but focus was slipping. The game began. The pace was fast, physical, intense. Michael drove the lane, absorbed contact, finished through defenders like he always did. The crowd exploded. Commentators shouted his name, but while the world celebrated, Michael glanced toward the stands. The man wasn't cheering, he was crying. Tears streamed quietly down his face, untouched by the chaos around him. What kind of story makes a stranger cry in the middle of history? Michael's stomach tightened. This was no coincidence. This was no random fan. This was personal. Midway through the second quarter, Michael stole the ball and took off down the court. The defender chased him. The crowd rose to its feet. Michael soared, a powerful dunk. The arena shook. Fans screamed, but Michael didn't celebrate. He landed, turned slightly, and looked again. The man placed a hand over his mouth, as if trying to hold something in, as if this moment meant far more to him than anyone else in the building. Michael felt his throat tighten. At timeout, Michael sat on the bench, towel draped over his head. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the floor. He peeked out again. The man hadn't moved, but now, he was looking directly at Michael, not through him, not past him, at him. Their eyes locked, and time slowed. What happens when two lives collide without a single word? The noise faded. The lights dimmed. For a brief second, it felt like the entire arena disappeared. It was just them. Michael saw something in the man's eyes he recognized. Pain, the kind that doesn't scream, the kind that sits quietly for years, the kind that only people who have lost something truly understand. Michael swallowed hard. Why did this feel familiar? Why did this feel like something from his own past? The third quarter began. Michael played on autopilot. Fadeaway, steal, assist. His body knew what to do, but his mind was somewhere else. When was the last time basketball wasn't the most important thing on the court for Michael Jordan? Every break in play, his eyes returned to the man, still crying, still watching, still standing. Late in the third quarter, something unexpected happened. The man closed his eyes, just for a moment, like he was reliving something. Like he was remembering. When he opened them again, he looked straight at Michael, and nodded, not a fan's nod, a human nod, one that said, "You don't know me, but I know what this means." Michael felt his chest tighten. By the fourth quarter, the game was close. Tension filled the air, every possession mattered. Michael thrived in these moments. Pressure was his fuel, but tonight, something else was driving him, something deeper, something heavier. What if greatness isn't about winning, but about being seen? With under a minute left, Michael hit a clutch jumper. The crowd lost its mind. Teammates slapped his back. The bench exploded. Michael jogged back on defense, and that's when it happened. He glanced up, and the man was no longer crying. He was smiling, through tears, a quiet, broken smile. Michael's breath caught. That smile wasn't about the shot. It wasn't about the score. It was about something else entirely. The final buzzer sounded, the Bulls won. Confetti fell. Cameras rushed the court. Fans screamed his name. Michael waved, acknowledging the noise. But his eyes searched the stands. Would the man still be there? He scanned the familiar spot. Empty, the man was gone, just like that. Michael felt an unexpected emptiness settle in his chest. In the locker room, celebration filled the air. Music blasted, laughter echoed, but Michael sat quietly, staring at his hands. He replayed the man's face over and over, the tears, the nod, the smile. Why did it feel like that moment mattered more than the win? Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Michael sat on the edge of the bed. The city lights flickered outside the window. He didn't turn on the TV, didn't check highlights, didn't call anyone. He just sat there, thinking, what if that stranger knew something about Michael? That Michael had forgotten. Memories surfaced. A young boy in North Carolina, shooting on a dusty court. Being cut from the varsity team. Doubting himself, a father's voice reminding him not to quit. Michael closed his eyes. The man's face blended with those memories, and suddenly it made sense why it felt familiar. Because that man wasn't watching a superstar. He was watching a reminder of something he once believed in. Michael lay back on the bed. For the first time in years, basketball felt secondary, not unimportant, but smaller than the moment he had just experienced. When did Michael Jordan become more than just Michael Jordan? He didn't know the man's name, didn't know his story, but he knew one thing for sure now: this wasn't over, because people don't cry like that. Unless something inside them is breaking, or healing. The next morning, Michael woke up with a strange feeling. Not pressure, not nerves, purpose. He knew the stranger would return, and next time, Michael wouldn't just notice him. He would act. A memory he tried to forget. Michael Jordan woke up before the alarm. That alone was unusual. Sleep had always come easily to him after games. His body exhausted, his mind calm, but not this time. His eyes opened slowly, staring at the hotel ceiling, his heart already awake. The stranger's face was still there, clear, sharp, unshakable. Why did a man he had never spoken to feel closer than people he saw every day? Michael sat up and rubbed his face. The city outside was quiet, bathed in early morning light. For a moment, everything felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. He swung his legs over the bed and stood up. That's when the memories began to surface. Michael walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The streets below reminded him of something. Something old, a different place, a different time, a younger version of himself. Suddenly, he wasn't a global icon. He was a kid again. He remembered the cracked asphalt of the neighborhood court in North Carolina, the sound of the ball bouncing unevenly, the cold mornings, the quiet evenings when no one was watching. Back then, there were no crowds, no cameras, no cheers, just a dream that felt too big for a small-town boy. Before the world believed in Michael Jordan, who believed in him, he remembered being cut from the varsity team. The walk home, the embarrassment, the anger, that feeling of not being enough. Michael clenched his jaw. He had buried those memories deep, under championships, trophies, and legends. But the stranger's face had dug them back up. Why? Michael leaned his forehead against the glass. He saw his father's face now. James Jordan, strong, calm, steady, a man who never raised his voice, but whose words carried weight. You don't quit. His father used to say, you work. Michael swallowed hard. That voice echoed louder now than it had in years. What if the stranger reminded him of the man who shaped him? The tears, the nod, the quiet respect. Michael exhaled slowly. It wasn't admiration he had seen in the man's eyes. It was recognition. As if the man wasn't looking at Michael Jordan the superstar, but Michael Jordan the boy. Michael turned away from the window and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands rested on his knees. For the first time in years, his chest felt heavy. How many people see themselves in me? He whispered. He had always known he inspired people, but this felt different. This felt personal. What if the stranger wasn't following Michael Jordan, but following his own lost dream? Practice that morning felt strange. Michael went through the motions, but his mind wandered. Drills blurred together, plays repeated. Teammates noticed something was off. You good, Mike? Someone asked. Michael nodded, but he wasn't sure if it was true. Every bounce of the ball pulled another memory loose. Long car rides to games, cheap gyms, missed shots, second chances. Michael had spent years building armor, mental toughness, emotional control, but now that armor had a crack, and through it poured memories he thought he had outgrown. After practice, Michael stayed behind, alone. He sat at center court, the arena empty and silent. No noise, no pressure, just him and his thoughts. When was the last time Michael Jordan sat alone with himself? He looked around the seats, thousands of empty chairs, thousands of invisible lives, each with their own struggles, their own dreams, their own breaking points. Michael realized something unsettling. He didn't know who the stranger was, but he knew exactly what he was. He was a mirror. That afternoon, Michael skipped media, skipped lunch. He walked through the quiet halls of the arena instead. Each step echoed. Each echo felt like a question. Why now? Why him? Why this moment? Then a memory hit him harder than the rest. A night long ago, his father sitting in the stands, watching, not cheering, not clapping. Just watching. Michael stopped walking, his breath caught. Had he mistaken silence for absence all these years? James Jordan never screamed, never demanded. He watched, just like the stranger. Michael's hands curled into fists. That was it. That was the connection, the posture, the stillness, the quiet pride. The man in the crowd wasn't haunting him, he was reminding him. Michael sat down on a bench in the hallway. He closed his eyes. He saw the stranger again, standing, watching, crying, smiling, nodding. Why did it feel like forgiveness? Because maybe Michael had forgotten something important. That greatness isn't just about being seen. It's about being felt. That night, as game time approached, Michael felt different, not distracted, focused, centered, grounded, but also open. What happens when a legend remembers where he came from? As he walked toward the court, he scanned the stands instinctively, not to find the stranger, but to understand him, to see him not as a mystery, but as a story waiting to be heard. Michael tied his shoes slowly. He breathed deeply, and for the first time in a long time he made a promise: if the stranger appeared again, Michael wouldn't ignore him, wouldn't wonder from a distance, wouldn't let the moment pass. Because some faces aren't meant to disappear, they're meant to be acknowledged, and some memories don't resurface to haunt us, they return to guide us. Michael stood up, the lights brightened, the crowd roared. But inside, something had shifted, something permanent. The game was still the same, but Michael Jordan was not, and somewhere in the crowd, the stranger was already there, waiting. The quiet conversation, Michael Jordan had made up his mind. No more wondering, no more distance, no more unanswered questions. If the stranger was there again tonight, Michael would not walk away. The arena filled slowly, seat by seat, noise rising like a tide. Vendors shouted, music echoed, cameras flashed, everything felt normal. Yet Michael felt unusually calm, focused, grounded. As he stepped onto the court for war, Mups, he didn't scan the crowd immediately. He let the moment breathe, then, slowly, he looked up. There he is. The stranger stood exactly where Michael expected him to be. Same section, same stillness, same quiet gravity, but this time something else was present. Tension, not fear, anticipation, almost as if the man knew what was coming. Michael bounced the ball once, twice, then passed it off and walked toward the sideline. His heartbeat stayed steady. Years of pressure had taught him how to control moments like this. But this wasn't a game situation, this was human. Michael motioned subtly toward security, not aggressively, not urgently, just enough. Then, before anyone could react, Michael did something no one expected. He stepped off the court. Gasps rippled through the nearby rows, fans leaned forward, cameras swiveled, security stiffened. Michael walked, not rushed, not hesitant, straight toward the man. What happens when a legend steps into the crowd for one person? The stranger didn't move, didn't step back, didn't smile. He simply waited. Michael stopped just a few feet away. Up close, the man looked older than Michael had first thought. Lines around his eyes. Hands slightly rough. A face shaped by years of responsibility. Michael spoke first. "Why do you come to every game?" His voice was calm, quiet, direct. The noise around them faded. The man swallowed. For a moment, it looked like he might not answer. Then he did. "I don't come to the games," he said softly. Michael frowned. "I've seen you in 3 cities." The man nodded. "I come to you." Michael felt something tighten in his chest. "Why?" he asked. The man hesitated. His eyes flickered. Toward the court, toward the crowd, then back to Michael. "Because you remind me of someone," he said. Who could Michael Jordan possibly remind him of? Michael waited. The man exhaled slowly. "Myself," he said. The word hung heavy between them. Michael didn't interrupt. He didn't rush the moment. Years of leadership had taught him something important. When someone finally speaks, you listen. The man continued. "I used to play," he said. "Not like you, but I loved it, lived for it." Michael nodded slightly. "In college." The man went on. "I thought basketball would be my way out, my chance." He laughed quietly, without humor. Life had other plans. Michael glanced around. Security hovered nervously. Fans whispered, but Michael raised his hand again. "Stay back." This mattered. The man's voice grew steadier. "An injury," he said. "Then bills, then responsibilities. I had a family to take care of. Dreams don't pay rent." Michael felt the words hit somewhere deep. How many dreams end not with failure, but with responsibility? "I stopped playing," the man said. "Told myself it was the right thing." He paused. "But some nights, I still hear the ball bouncing." Michael's jaw tightened. He understood that sound. "So why follow me?" Michael asked gently. The man looked up. This time he didn't hesitate. "Because my son watches you." Michael's breath caught. "Your son?" The man nodded. "He loves the game, loves it the way I used to." The man's eyes softened. "But lately, he's been losing belief. Says dreams don't work for people like us." Michael felt a chill. How powerful can one sentence from a child be? "I didn't know what to tell him anymore." The man continued. "Then one night we watched you play." He smiled faintly. "You didn't quit. You didn't slow down. You didn't settle." Michael stayed silent. "And my son said something I'll never forget." The man said, voice breaking, "If he didn't give up, maybe I shouldn't either." The words landed harder than any trash talk Michael had ever heard, because this wasn't about basketball. This was about belief. "So I started coming," the man said, "not to watch you win." Michael blinked. "But to remind myself why I once believed." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the arena rushed back in. Michael felt something warm behind his eyes. When was the last time Michael Jordan felt this vulnerable? "What's your name?" Michael asked. The man hesitated. "David." Michael nodded. "Michael," he said, extending his hand. David shook it with both hands, firm but respectful. Michael took a breath. "You don't have to stand," he said. "You don't have to be silent." David smiled sadly. "I don't want anything," he said. "I just want my son to see that it's possible." Michael glanced at the court, at the game, at the cameras, at the fans, then back at David. "You ever tell him your story?" Michael asked. David looked down. "No," he said. "I don't want him to think quitting is okay." Michael shook his head. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "quitting one thing so you can fight for something else is strength." David's eyes filled again. Michael placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Bring your son tomorrow," he said. David looked up, stunned. "Tomorrow?" Michael nodded. "Before the game." David's voice shook. "You serious?" Michael smiled. Not the famous smile, but a real one. "I don't joke about moments like this." David tried to speak. Failed, then simply nodded. Michael stepped back. Security relaxed. The crowd buzzed, unsure what they had just witnessed. Michael turned toward the court, then paused. He looked back one last time. "Thank you," he said. David shook his head. "No," he whispered. "Thank you for noticing." As Michael jogged back onto the court, the crowd erupted. But something was different now. The noise didn't feed him. The moment did. What if this was the most important conversation of Michael Jordan's career? The game went on, but Michael played lighter, freer. Purpose filled every movement, because he wasn't just playing for a win anymore. He was playing for a man who never stopped believing, even when he stopped dreaming. And somewhere in the stands, David stood again, not alone, not silent, but hopeful. The story behind the stranger. David didn't sleep that night. Not because he was tired, but because his heart was too full. He sat at the small kitchen table long after midnight, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Across from him sat his son's backpack, half unzipped, a basketball peeking out from the side pocket. David stared at it and smiled. How do you explain to a child that tomorrow could change everything? In the next room, Ethan slept peacefully, unaware that his life was standing at the edge of a turning point. David leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Memories came rushing in faster and louder than he expected. David had once been that kid, the one who stayed after practice, the one who shot until the lights went off, the one who believed basketball wasn't just a game, but a way out. He grew up in a small town where dreams were dangerous things. People warned you not to hold them too tightly, but David did anyway. What happens when a dream grows bigger than the life around it? In high school, David was good, not legendary, but good enough. College scouts noticed him. Coaches talked about potential. For the first time, people used the word future when they spoke about him. David believed it. He earned a scholarship, stepped onto a college court with trembling hands and a burning heart. That was supposed to be the beginning. Then came the injury, a bad landing, a sharp pain. A sound he would never forget. The doctors were careful with their words, but their eyes told the truth. Recovery will take time. Time didn't wait. Bills came. Tuition loomed. Family needed help. Basketball slowly slipped from David's hands. Not all at once, but piece by piece. How quietly can a dream disappear before you even notice it's gone? David left school, took a job, then another, then another. Life moved on, but the sound of the ball bouncing, it never left his head. Years later, Ethan was born. Holding that tiny body in his arms, David made a promise. I'll give you everything I couldn't have. He meant it. Ethan grew fast, and one day, he picked up a basketball. David noticed the way his son smiled when the ball left his hands, the way his eyes lit up, the same way David's used to. What do you do when your child inherits the dream you buried? At first, David stayed quiet. He drove Ethan to practice, sat in the stands, just watched. He never pushed, never coached from the sidelines, because deep down he was afraid of building a dream he couldn't protect. Then Ethan started asking questions. Do you think I could be really good? Do people like us make it? Is it okay to dream big? David didn't always have answers. Some nights he stared at the ceiling long after Ethan fell asleep, wondering if silence was safer than hope. Then one night, everything changed. They were watching a game on TV. Michael Jordan, dominating, relentless, unstoppable. Ethan leaned forward, eyes wide. Dad, he said, why does he never give up? David swallowed. Because he believes, he said. Ethan nodded slowly. If he didn't quit. Ethan said quietly, maybe I shouldn't either. That sentence hit David harder than any injury ever had, because it wasn't about Michael Jordan. It was about Ethan choosing belief. What if hope doesn't come from advice, but from example? That was the night David bought their first ticket. Cheap seats, high up, but close enough to see greatness. David didn't cheer, didn't clap. He stood and watched, because for the first time in years, he was watching a dream stay alive. One game became two. Two became three. David saved money he shouldn't have. Worked extra hours, skipped comforts, because every time Ethan watched Michael play, something inside the boy grew stronger, but then doubt returned. Ethan had a bad game, then another. Kids laughed. Coaches criticized. One night, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed. I don't think I'm good enough, he whispered. David felt his chest crack. How do you teach belief when you're still learning it yourself? That's when David started going alone, city to city, game to game, not to escape, but to remember. He stood quietly because noise had never saved a dream, belief had, and then Michael noticed him. David saw it the first time. That glance, that pause, David almost walked away, but something told him to stay. Each time Michael looked, David felt seen, not as a fan, but as a man who once believed. The night Michael approached him, David's hands shook. He didn't plan what to say, didn't practice. He just told the truth, and when Michael told him to bring Ethan, David nearly broke. Now, morning light crept into the kitchen. David stood up and walked into Ethan's room. He sat on the bed gently. "Hey," he whispered. Ethan stirred. "Dad, you ready to meet someone special?" Ethan sat up slowly. "Who?" David smiled. "Michael Jordan." Ethan froze. "No way." David nodded. "Yes way." Ethan's eyes filled instantly. They arrived at the arena early, before the crowds, before the noise. Ethan's hands shook as they walked through the tunnel. Then he saw him. Michael Jordan. In real life, not on a screen, not in a dream. What happens when belief steps into reality? Michael walked toward them, calm and warm. He knelt to Ethan's level. "You like basketball?" he asked. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Michael smiled. "Then don't let anyone tell you who you can't be." David watched his son's face change. Confidence replacing fear. Hope replacing doubt. And in that moment, David understood something important. Michael Jordan didn't just save dreams, he reminded people they were allowed to have them. Later, as they left the arena, Ethan held the signed ball tightly. "Dad," he said, "I'm going to work harder than ever." David nodded. "I know." That night, David didn't hear the ball bouncing in his head. He heard something better, peace. Sometimes the dream doesn't come back to you, it lives on through someone else. And somewhere in the world, Michael Jordan played on unaware that his greatest victory that season didn't show up on a scoreboard. It showed up in a child who believed again. Michael Jordan didn't talk about it. Not to his teammates, not to the coaches, not to the media. Some decisions are too personal for words, and this was one of them. The morning after meeting Ethan, Michael arrived at the practice facility earlier than usual. The building was quiet, lights dim, hardwood untouched. He liked it this way. Silence had always helped him think, but today, silence felt different. He sat alone on the bench, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The image wouldn't leave his mind. Ethan's hands shaking as he held the basketball, the way his eyes widened when Michael spoke to him, the way David stood behind his son, proud, nervous, hopeful. When was the last time Michael Jordan felt this responsible for a life off the court? Michael leaned back and exhaled slowly. He had inspired millions, but this felt heavier, because this wasn't about motivation. This was about direction. Michael had spent his entire career chasing greatness. Relentless practices, impossible standards, a hunger that never slept. That hunger made him great, but now it asked a new question. What does greatness owe back? He stood up and walked to the center of the empty court. He bounced the ball once. The sound echoed. He bounced it again. Same echo. Michael smiled faintly. Some sounds never change. He began shooting, not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate. Each shot brought memories. Being cut from varsity, staying late in the gym, his father's quiet presence in the stands. Had Michael ever truly thanked the people who believed before the world did? Michael stopped shooting and rested the ball against his hip. David came back to his mind, a man who didn't ask for anything, a man who didn't want fame, a man who stood silently, not to be seen, but to remember. Michael felt something shift inside him, a realization. For years, Michael had believed leadership meant pushing people to their limits, demanding excellence, never settling. That philosophy built champions, but it didn't always heal dreams. What if leadership also meant protecting belief? Later that day, during film review, Michael barely spoke. Teammates noticed, coach noticed, but no one pressed him. They all knew when Michael went quiet. Something serious was happening. That night, Michael returned home and sat alone in his living room. Lights off, city glowing outside. He stared at his reflection in the window. Older now, wiser, still hungry, but different. What happens when the greatest competitor realizes the game is bigger than winning? Michael thought about Ethan, about how many kids like him were out there, watching, learning, deciding who they would become based on what they saw. That thought unsettled him, not with fear, with responsibility. Michael picked up his phone, scrolled through contacts, stopped, put it back down. This wasn't about announcements. This wasn't about publicity. This was about intention. The next game night arrived. The arena filled, energy buzzing. Michael walked out with his usual intensity, but something was different. His eyes weren't just scanning defenders, they were scanning people, faces, stories, lives. What if every crowd carried 1,000 silent struggles? He spotted David and Ethan in the stands. This time they were sitting. Ethan clutched the ball. David's hand rested on his son's shoulder. Michael nodded subtly. They nodded back, no words, none needed. The game started. Michael played hard, but controlled, aggressive, but thoughtful. Each movement felt intentional, purposeful. Midway through the second quarter, Michael did something unexpected. He passed up a good shot. Instead, he passed to a teammate who needed confidence. The teammate scored. The bench erupted. Michael smiled. Since when did Michael Jordan care more about someone else's moment than his own? As the game continued, Michael felt lighter. The pressure he'd carried for years didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It wasn't about proving anymore. It was about guiding. During halftime, Michael walked down the tunnel slowly. A staff member approached him. "Everything okay, Mike?" Michael nodded. "Better than okay." Late in the fourth quarter, with the game nearly decided, Michael glanced toward the stands again. Ethan was on his feet now, cheering, believing. David stood beside him, not silent this time, clapping, smiling. Michael felt warmth rise in his chest. The final buzzer sounded, the Bulls won, but Michael didn't raise his arms immediately. Instead, he looked straight at Ethan and nodded. What does it mean when a legend nods back at belief? After the game, while reporters waited, Michael did something rare. He walked past them, ignored questions, ignored cameras, and headed straight toward the tunnel nearest the stands. Security hesitated. Michael waved them off. "I've got this." David and Ethan stood frozen as Michael approached, up close again, real again. Michael crouched to Ethan's level. "You still working hard?" he asked. Ethan nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir." Michael smiled. "Good, because talent is common. Work ethic isn't." David swallowed. Michael stood and turned to him. "You did the right thing," Michael said. David blinked. "What?" "Not giving up on him," Michael said, "even when you doubted yourself." David's eyes filled. "I didn't know if I was doing enough." Michael shook his head. "Sometimes showing up is everything." That night, Michael went home and slept deeply. For the first time in weeks, over the next few games, something changed. Michael noticed people more, the quiet fans, the nervous kids, the parents watching with hope in their eyes. He started signing more autographs, taking extra seconds, making eye contact. How powerful is one moment of being seen? He didn't announce it, didn't brand it, didn't seek praise, but Michael had made a decision. He would no longer play only for himself, or for rings, or for history. He would play with awareness. One evening, a teammate asked him quietly, "What's gotten into you lately?" Michael smiled. "I remembered why I started." David and Ethan stopped traveling. They didn't need to anymore. Belief had taken root. Weeks later, Michael received a handwritten letter. Inside was a drawing, a basketball court, a tall figure wearing number 23, and a small boy shooting beside him. At the bottom were simple words, "I won't quit." Michael sat back, eyes closed, breathing slow. What if this was the greatest win of his career? Michael Jordan would always be known as the greatest competitor. But from that moment on, he carried something else onto the court. Legacy. Some moments don't look important at first. They don't come with loud music. They don't make headlines. They don't stop the world. But they quietly change it. The morning of the game arrived earlier than expected. Sunlight slipped through the curtains as Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, tying his sneakers for the third time. His hands shook, not from fear, but from excitement he couldn't control. Today wasn't just another day. Today felt different. How does a child sleep when his hero might change his future? David stood in the doorway, watching his son. He saw the way Ethan checked the basketball bag again and again, as if afraid the moment might disappear if he didn't hold onto something real. "You ready?" David asked softly. Ethan nodded, but his voice trembled. "I don't want to mess this up." David knelt in front of him. "You can't mess up being yourself," he said. They arrived at the arena early, earlier than anyone else. The building was quiet, almost empty. The massive space felt bigger without the noise, like a cathedral waiting for something sacred to happen. Ethan's footsteps echoed as they walked through the tunnel. Each step felt heavier than the last. What happens when a dream finally walks into reality? Michael Jordan was already there. No cameras, no crowd, no spotlight, just a man in gym clothes dribbling slowly at half court. The sound of the ball filled the space. Ethan froze. "That's him," he whispered. David nodded. Michael noticed them and walked over, calm and unhurried. He smiled, not as a legend, but as a mentor. "You must be Ethan," he said. Ethan's voice caught in his throat. "Yes, sir." Michael chuckled softly. "Relax," he said. "This is just a gym." But Ethan knew better. Michael tossed Ethan the ball. "Show me your shot," he said. Ethan hesitated. His feet shuffled. His grip tightened. He took a deep breath and shot. The ball hit the rim, bounced, then rolled in. Michael nodded again. Ethan shot again, missed. Michael nodded again. "Good." "Why would missing be a good thing? Missing means you're trying," Michael said. "And trying is where growth lives." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing every word. David watched silently, heart full. Michael stepped beside Ethan. "Let me tell you something," he said quietly. "I've missed more shots than most people will ever take." Ethan looked up, surprised. Michael continued, "But the world remembers the ones I kept shooting. They worked together for 20 minutes, footwork, balance, confidence." Michael corrected gently, encouraged constantly. Ethan grew taller with every word. Then Michael stopped. He picked up the ball and held it out. "You know what this really is?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "A test," Michael said. Ethan's eyes widened. Michael smiled. "Not of skill, of belief." Michael took a marker and signed the ball. He handed it to Ethan. "But remember," he said, tapping Ethan's chest, "this is more important than anything written on leather." Ethan hugged the ball tightly. How powerful is it when belief becomes personal? Game time approached. The arena filled. Noise returned. Lights brightened. Ethan and David took their seats. This time Ethan didn't sit quietly. He stood. He cheered. He believed. Midway through the game, Michael glanced toward the stands. He saw Ethan, watching, learning, becoming. Michael smiled. Late in the game, Michael hit a difficult shot. The crowd erupted, but Michael didn't celebrate immediately. He looked toward Ethan. Ethan jumped in excitement. Michael nodded. The final buzzer sounded, victory, but the moment wasn't over. After the game, Michael walked toward the stands again. Security moved instinctively. Michael waved them back. He walked straight to Ethan. He handed him his jersey. The arena gasped. What does it mean when a legend gives away a piece of history? For when you doubt yourself, Michael said. Ethan couldn't speak. David turned away, tears flowing freely. Michael looked at David. "You did something important," he said. "What?" David asked. "You didn't let fear teach your son how to dream." As they left the arena, Ethan held the jersey like it was fragile glass. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm going to work harder than ever." David nodded. "I know." Years passed. Ethan trained relentlessly. Bad days came, failures came, but quitting didn't, because every time doubt crept in. He remembered that morning, that nod, that belief. What if one moment was enough to last a lifetime? Michael Jordan went on to win more games, more titles, more praise. But he never forgot Ethan, because sometimes the greatest shot isn't taken on the court, it's taken in someone's heart. After that night, something quietly changed, not on the scoreboard, not in the headlines, not in the highlight reels, but in the crowd. The next home game arrived, same arena, same lights, same roar. Michael Jordan walked onto the court with his usual confidence, the crowd rising to its feet the moment he appeared. Cameras followed him like shadows. But Michael's eyes searched for something else, a familiar spot, a familiar presence. Why was the first thing he looked for no longer there? The section where David always stood was empty. No quiet man. No still figure, no eyes locked in purpose. just fans, cheering, laughing, holding signs. Michael felt a strange pause inside his chest. Not disappointment, something softer, something complete. He checked again during warm-ups. Nothing during the first quarter, nothing by halftime. He understood. David wasn't coming back, and somehow that felt right. How do you know when a chapter has ended without a goodbye? The game continued. Michael played brilliantly, but between plays his mind wandered. He remembered the first time he noticed David, standing alone, silent, unseen by everyone else. Back then, Michael thought David was following him. Now, he realized the truth. David had never been following Michael. He had been walking with him, for as long as he needed to. On the flight to the next city, Michael sat by the window, watching clouds stretch endlessly beneath him. He thought about how temporary moments can be permanent in impact, how some people enter your life not to stay, but to change you. What if the most important people in our lives are only meant to pass through? Another city, another arena, another crowd. Michael scanned the stands again out of habit. No David, no Ethan, and yet Michael felt their presence, in the way he warmed up, in the way he passed the ball. In the way he acknowledged the crowd. Something inside Michael had softened, but not weakened. If anything, it had sharpened his purpose. He played with clarity now, with gratitude, with awareness. Teammates noticed it. "You're different lately," one said during practice. Michael smiled. "Maybe I finally see the game clearly." Weeks passed, then months. The season rolled on, wins piled up, records fell, and still, David never returned. One evening after a long road trip, Michael returned home to find a letter waiting on the kitchen counter. No return address, just his name, handwritten. Michael paused before opening it. Why did his hands feel heavier holding this envelope than any trophy? Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photograph. Michael unfolded the letter first. "Dear Michael, you don't know me beyond a few moments, but those moments changed everything. My son no longer doubts himself. Not because he thinks he'll be famous, but because he believes he's allowed to try. That belief didn't come from your championships. It came from your time. We didn't disappear. We moved forward. Thank you for seeing us when we felt invisible." David Michael swallowed hard. He picked up the photograph. It showed Ethan, standing on a small outdoor court, shooting, smiling, free. Michael leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, breathing slow. What if success isn't measured by what you gain, but by what continues after you're gone? The letter stayed with him, literally. Michael folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, not with contracts or awards, but with personal things, things that mattered. As the season moved toward its climax, pressure intensified, media scrutiny, high expectations, championship talk, but Michael felt grounded. When championship talk, but Michael felt grounded. When doubt crept in, he remembered Ethan. When frustration rose, he remembered David. When ego threatened to surface, he remembered silence. During a critical playoff game, Michael sat on the bench late in the fourth quarter. The crowd chanted his name. He looked up. Thousands of faces stared back. For a moment, he imagined David standing among them, watching, not cheering, just present. Michael smiled to himself. What if someone somewhere was watching this game to decide whether to keep going? That thought changed everything. Michael played the final minutes with precision and purpose. The Bulls won, but Michael didn't celebrate wildly. He raised a hand, acknowledged the crowd, and walked calmly to the tunnel. Years later, after retirement, Michael would often think back on his career. The wins were vivid, the losses sharper, but the memory of David and Ethan remained unusually clear because it wasn't attached to pressure or expectation or ego. It was attached to meaning. One afternoon, Michael attended a small charity event. No cameras, no press, just kids. At one end of the gym, a teenage boy practiced jump shots alone. Focused, relentless, Michael watched quietly. Something about the posture felt familiar, the stillness, the commitment. Michael approached. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ethan." The boy replied. Michael smiled. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The circle had closed. What if inspiration doesn't fade, it evolves? Michael left the gym that day with a strange sense of peace, because he realized something important. David hadn't disappeared, he had succeeded, his job was done, the stranger was never seen again, not because the story ended but because it continued where it mattered most, in belief, in effort, in a child who refused to quit. And Michael Jordan, he played on, not just as a legend, but as a reminder that sometimes the quietest people in the crowd are the reason the game matters at all. Years pass quietly, not all at once. Not dramatically, but in small moments that stack into a lifetime. Michael Jordan no longer woke up to the sound of roaring crowds. The arenas faded into memories, the noise softened into echoes, but one thing never left him: a face in the crowd. Why do some memories refuse to fade, even when the lights go out? Retirement gave Michael something he never had before: stillness, time, perspective. He traveled, he reflected, he watched games from afar. And slowly, he began to understand something deeper than basketball. Legacy isn't built only in championships. It's built in moments no camera ever records, moments when no one is watching, moments when a choice is made not for applause, but for meaning. One afternoon, Michael sat alone in a quiet gym. Dust floated in the sunlight. The sound of a single bouncing ball echoed against empty walls. He watched a group of kids practicing. Some were confident, some uncertain, some afraid to even take a shot. Michael saw himself in all of them, and then he saw Ethan, not physically, but in spirit. What if the people who change us continue speaking long after they're gone? Michael walked over to a shy boy standing near the baseline. "Why aren't you shooting?" he asked. The boy shrugged. "I don't think I'm good enough." Michael smiled gently. He had heard those words before. "Neither did I," he said. The boy looked up, eyes wide, hope flickering. In that moment, Michael understood something profound. The story wasn't about David or Ethan or even himself. It was about permission. Permission to try, permission to fail, permission to believe. Michael began mentoring quietly. No press releases, no announcements, just conversations, just presence, just belief passed forward. Years later, at a Hall of Fame ceremony, Michael stood on stage. The crowd waited for the expected words, the stats, the wins, the greatness, but Michael paused, and then he said something unexpected. "There was a man," Michael began, "who once watched me play, quietly, faithfully, without asking for anything." The room fell silent. He reminded me why I fell in love with this game in the first place. No names were mentioned, no details given, but the message landed. Why do the most important stories never make it into headlines? After the speech, reporters asked questions. Michael answered politely. But when one asked who the man was, Michael smiled. He was just someone in the crowd. He said, but Michael knew the truth. That stranger was never just a stranger. He was a mirror, a reminder, a lesson wrapped in silence. Somewhere, years later, Ethan stood on another court. Older now, stronger, teaching younger kids how to shoot, how to miss, how to keep going. He didn't talk about Michael Jordan often. He didn't need to, because belief had become part of him. What if one moment of belief could echo through generations? David watched from the sidelines, proud, peaceful, content. He never sought recognition, never needed credit, because he had already won. And Michael carried the lesson everywhere, in business, in leadership, in life. He listened more, noticed more, assumed less. He learned that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it stands quietly in the crowd, waiting to be seen. As the years continued, Michael often returned to empty gyms, not to relive the past, but to remember the meaning. Each echoing bounce reminded him every dream needs someone to notice. Every believer needs someone to believe in them. What if today someone is watching you, not to admire you, but to find hope? Because somewhere in the crowd, there is always a face, and sometimes that face changes everything. So if you ever feel invisible, if you ever feel unnoticed, if you ever feel like your presence doesn't matter, remember this story. You don't need to be famous to change a life. You just need to see someone, And if you ever become the one being watched, choose kindness, choose time, choose belief, because long after the lights fade, that face will never leave the crowd.